A very good day, a warm welcome to our discussion on the impact of crisis on technologies and human capital management. Today we'll focus on the manpower and we'll talk about how the pandemic impacted the teams of organizations in business community and public sector. We'll talk about what managerial techniques stopped working efficiently and what the companies had to change to bring down the negative impact of the pandemic on people. They have the real professionals in management, well aware of the importance of the teamwork for the overall success. Deputy Governor of the Nizhny Novgorod region, Mr. Tolmachev, Supervisory Board of the ACIG, and Evgeniy Chekin, Deputy Chairman of the Government of the Kamchatka territory. And we're expecting a person from the Schneider Electric, Maxim Ageev, Vice President. So, some housekeeping. We'll have the smart talk discussion today. That means that we'll not have lengthy interventions and reports, only the key points and exchanges, lively exchanges, and best practices and pithy comments are expected from you. I'll be moderating that. My name is Alexey Shipov from the RANEPA Academy, the head of the Change Management Center. And so off we go. We'll start with the key assumption, how the pandemic impacted the human resources, and any negative or positive comments in the first set of data. Please, attention to the screen. Just note, during the 2020 crisis, we had surveys, and there is the wear out, the burnout of 49% of the employees, and the efficiency of the remote work went down according to 41% of employees. And the key factors that impacted the reduction in efficiencies, the burnout, 49% is the anxiety and fear during the pandemic, and part of the corporate traditions has been put on the back burner, and many people lack that badly. Today, we also invite the HR professional community to attend. They are streaming us online, and they will be the active voters and poll participants that will help us shape the content for the discussion. These are HR professionals from business community and public administration, and I have the wizardry of the new technology in my smartphone that will help us poll. And please, the first poll, put it on the screen and let it be visible for the speakers, if possible. So, what are we asking those that watch us online? What happened to your employees during the pandemic? No changes, reduced efficiency, reduced agency and motivation, no glaring eyes, more productive or less productive, and we'll start the smart talk while they vote at this poll. So what happened to your employees and to your teams during the pandemic? And how would you characterize the main change with the people? I'll try to be lenient and democratic. Just whoever wants, let him start. Alexey being the new participant of the debate. As a matter of fact, actually, what key changes have we seen? Schneider Electric is a commercial entity, organization, a private organization, and we have been using digital platforms and tools. We started our digital transformation journey long ago. The discovery of this year, of the past year, was as follows. All the developments that we previously had perceived to be necessarily physical, like meetings with clients and partner meetings and team action, team activities like the working groups, meetings that required the physical presence, face-to-face format. We have been able to shift all those to the remote format without any major loss in efficiency. Despite the lockdown and all those restrictions and closed borders, still we organized our CEO meeting with the meeting of the CEO of Sibur. And Pascal was in Hong Kong and Mr. Konov was in Moscow, and still this virtual meeting took place. And business can operate remotely. Yeah, we'll speak about changes later, but what happened to people? It's possible to operate. What changes have you noticed with people, with manpower, with employees? What happened to them? Have you seen any loss in efficiency, any fear, any anxiety? How the state of people changed? Well, psychologically, everybody was under pressure, no doubt. And we heeded that. I mean, the safety of our manpower. So, after all, it all began in March for our region, and everybody was frustrated. No one was sure where we were heading. And the key role there belonged to the management and the leadership of the company to provide clear communications and the sense of direction. So there was some psychological pressure, and the productivity went down. So they spent more time to accomplish same goals and tasks, but enthusiasm and motivation stayed as they were. All right, some frustration and pressure and loss in productivity. But anyway, agency and enthusiasm up to the expectations. Anatoly, comment from you. You are a leader, a manager that pays a lot of attention on the team development. According to a major consultancy survey, during the remote work, efficiency goes down by 25% for individual tasks, and 49% is the drop in the teamwork. Can you comment on that? What are your perceptions? Well, probably more or less these are true. We measured 29% for the first indicator. But anyway, any crisis is full of challenges and opportunities at the same time. And we had to shift our approaches in dealing with the HR in public and private sectors. There arrived an understanding that all our region, the Nizhny Novgorod region, is a huge team of employees, because all the municipal officers saw their load increase manifold over a short period of time, exponentially. So we have lengthy cycles and processes, and there is little room for mistake, but all of a sudden we had to act off the cuff and play by ear. And the responsibility was with the leaders, and many of them became combat generals on duty, working round the clock without all those cumbersome procedures around. But some of the personnel, some part of the personnel was not able to work in crisis environment. Some of the people that don't believe them to be managers, top managers, but subordinates, faced personal challenges, and actually in terms of digital technology and hardware, we had a lot of constraints and pressure, although we had done something in advance anyway, we had to act quickly and quicken up our pace. But you know, when an employee works remotely and his or her kids study remotely, they only have one computer for their room. It is a very short conversation, a very long conversation. We can talk hours about that, but you know, it took us a month or two in the spring to be able to rebound to the previous levels, although the efficiency anyway went down. Well, we felt to be in a single bundle all together, and the public officials have this idea of commitment and dedication, although the teamwork suffered. But you know, in the top management, all the online capability and the Zoom meetups helped us accelerate things, and the decision-making is now done quicker, and you can have meetups with the business community on short notice. So, I mean, the top management has become more efficient. Yes, I would emphasize that. Evgeniy, what has happened to your personnel, and whether you think that the downside or the upside of the crisis prevailed? Well, anyway, I think that this crisis has become a stress test for the system, with both positive and negative after effects. Among the downside, I would note the fact that with the public service, both for the top managers and the midline personnel, the main the downside was the vague prospects for the future and fear for the health of themselves and their families. And the role of the leaders, of the top managers, was to ease up this anxiety and provide the protection for the whole of the employee team, adding up to the certainty of their. And the second point is the clear-up of teams. Not all managers or employees have been able to adapt themselves and improve their efficiency in terms of efficiency and results. Now, and outcomes of their work. Part of the employees were on quarantine, others worked remotely, and everybody's contribution to the teamwork came to the fore. Well, in the face-to-face format, you could not notice the efficiency of a specific employee, but remotely it was evident what every single employee was worth, and definitely the load went up because the federal decisions were transmitted to us quite quickly, and we had to generate some decisions and results and present them to Moscow. And the relevance of public support went up, and more demand we saw from the business community and the local communities, from people on the ground. So, after all, what we saw was that part of our employees were not up to the mark, and we had a reshuffle in our team, an overhaul in our team. All right, very interesting. So we had interesting polling results. The first option is that the psychological state of the employees worsened. Everybody noted the pressure, the psychological pressure, and the teamwork deteriorated, which is a negative impact for any organization. Second, nothing changed, or productivity went up. Well, probably this is the general outcome of the whole year. So I made a survey among the executive authorities, and I must note that those team and leaders that had been using remote formats and digital technology for a while were better prepared to measure all those improvements or deteriorations, and that were better adapted to the new circumstances, while those who had worked in the traditional format with lots of paperwork and red tape and manual operations, they chose the no change option in polling, while polling. So this is my opinion. So you will have to tell us how your managers, how your administrators adapted. And no initiative, no motivation. How have you been able to light your people up? I have a quick clarification, question for clarification. Eugen mentioned the uncertainty among employees, but everybody knows that when it all started, we believed it wouldn't last long. It would last for till the May holidays only. But you know, a sprint race and a marathon are two different things. But it wasn't a short period anyway. We didn't return quickly to the as before state. But it turned out to be a marathon. And I have a clarification question both to the business community and to the public authorities, whether it was hard to transform the managerial practices and the behavior of the personnel to embrace the understanding that it will last long. It's going to be permanent for a while. No, we had to come up with a position and a perception. You mentioned this sprint and the marathon, but we didn't have an understanding back then. We didn't have any time to think about that, because it was a very hot period, and when you work in a company, you are responsible for the company, the employees, and then probably their families. But it's all about a company. But when you are a municipal officer or a public officer, you are responsible with your decisions. You will impact the lives and livelihoods of all the people in your vicinity, in your region. But at the same time, a municipal officer is a common person, not a rank-and-file citizen, but also lacked understanding where we were heading at that time. And our HR team proved efficient, and we had been able to raise dedication with the personnel. And when we moved to the remote work format, we have been able to raise the efficiency, and we outsourced some of the HR functions, and that helped us get braced and prepared and respond quickly. And the decision-making and the top-down communications were quite swift. That helped us a lot. But in a couple of months, we had more understanding, we developed more understanding, and we figured that many of the functions that we had done on a daily basis before the pandemic, like lots of reports and presentations and preparing for interventions, we figured that it was not needed anymore, and the pandemic may impact the health and the safety of people, but we need all those tensions to transform our system, and I think that what happened in 2020 and is still lingering improved the public service and municipal service.
I would like to ask the speakers and the colleagues. We're going to continue with this topic, but I would like to move on to block 2 because the time is pressing us. What are the sources of the negative impact of the pandemic, the organizational sources? Let's move on to block 2. What was lacking and what needed to be revisited in managerial processes, in HR processes? Could you please put the data we have gathered on the screen for our speakers and participants of the discussion? As you can see, almost 80% of Russian employees are not content with remote work, or at least they're not entirely comfortable with that. They feel that remote work is not as efficient as it could be, and there are certain factors that influence that. First, the factor connected to separating private life and working time, but this is, of course, something related to self-discipline, and we're going to look at it closer. And, of course, there are other factors which can be impacted by companies, by the government, such as providing psychological support. And the most important thing is the change in psychological contacts. So I would like to ask to launch the second poll for our participants online. We are asking them what has impacted negatively remote work, lack of communication, or change of relations with colleagues, burnout of employees due to high stress and low level of ICT infrastructure development. So, a number of options you can choose, but I would like to pick up where Mr. Tolmachev ended. You said that you managed to retain the efficiency level. How did you manage to do that at Schneider Electric? You know, I do not think that I'm going to reveal something completely unexpected to you when I say that any organization serves a high purpose, and if it does so, then it unites people, it brings them together. And in our case, it was bringing people together, rallying them around our values, such as providing electricity and energy to critical infrastructure across the world. Schneider Electric assisted in building hospitals, in particular in Russia, using our equipment, and in Kazakhstan. So serving this purpose helped us rally together. And we also served the purposes of the company. It is a public company. Our company is listed on the stock exchange, and of course we are cognizant of our responsibility to our shareholders. We have to do everything, do our best, demonstrate that our company is efficient and that we can compete despite the crisis, and that despite the difficulties we are still going forward. And it is indeed based on how a company copes in a crisis that people judge its efficiency. Yes, but we are talking about the sources of this negative sentiment people are having, and here's some statistics. According to the world experience, the key reasons behind this negative sentiment are the disruption of social ties. So corporate culture and values glue people together and they help weather through a crisis. So what about this communication in your company? Has it undergone some changes during the pandemic? Because I think, of course, remote work has impacted these processes. How did you cope with that? No doubt about that, Alexey. There were questions in particular about communication, and I think communication is one of the key drivers that has an impact upon the efficiency of our company. Indeed, it was very difficult to set up this communication amid the pandemic. Of course, we used digital formats. We had done it before, but transitioning to digital entirely was a whole new challenge. We organized new formats, such as meetings of managers to share news from around the company across the world. How are we doing and where we're moving towards? And we have to do that, and we had to do that to understand where we are at and where we are moving to, and all that to demonstrate that this is not the end of the world and the company has a future. And I think it helped us cope with the frustration everyone felt during the first weeks of the pandemic. Yes, and our participants online are very active still. Could you please put on Evgeniy from Kamchatka territory, who is sharing his views on what impacted negatively the state of people? I think the most important reason for negative sentiments of employees is the fact that our employees do not know how to efficiently organize separating their free time and working time when they work remotely at home. They do not know how to set up their working place at home. They find it hard to self-motivate without any external source of motivation, and of course they're lacking in terms of planning and setting the tasks and accomplishing them. And I think this lack of skill of working outside your customary workplace, this is what had this negative impact on the efficiency of work. Yes, I think the speakers have already highlighted that lack of skill at self-organizing is one of the factors we've got to take into account. And I think this is a competence that is very important. It has to be developed. Yes, I agree entirely. This is a very important competence. Lagging behind were the employees that could not self-organize. We have looked at super job polls and we conducted our own polls and research, and we were astonished to find that 26% of people said that they find it inconvenient to work at home because they were distracted by their families. But another 25% had been saying that they found it comfortable to work at home. So there was a split. And there were some people who knew how to self-organize and others no. They didn't know how to do that. And we mentioned the university, and one of the main goals of this university set up was to help this self-organization, and we were paying a great deal of attention to lean technologies. Around 3,000 public officers learned these lean technologies, and even though it is only tangentially related to self-organization, still it was a huge boost, a huge help, and people knew how to adapt processes very fast, how to adapt to new circumstances. And look at paper and documents in paper, and we know that older generations are usually accustomed to paper, not to paperless circulation. And still we managed to achieve great headway in moving from paper, going digital. And our team understood in general how it can adapt, how it can manage changes amid new realities. Thank you. Evgeniy, what do you think? What are the main sources, organizational sources of these negative sentiments? What are the main challenges Kamchatka Krai government is facing? I agree with a lot of what has been said here. I'm not going to add to that or expand on that, but looking at organizational reasons that brought about some internal stress among our employees, I can say that there was a lack of standardized processes based on digital technologies. They had not been there yet. We know the mindset of public officers, of municipal officers. The mindset requires a certain organization, a certain set of rules according to which they operate. So we can see that those ministries, those executive authorities that had experience of using digital communication, remote communication, were faster at adapting and more efficient at adapting. They set the pace and they transitioned to a new format of work very quickly, whereas those ministries that stuck to traditional formats such as paper, circulation, a lot of personal meetings, collective decision-making, trying to avoid individual responsibility for their decisions, they were those that suffered the greatest stress and strain. And it's just a general observation. And secondly, indeed, we had not anticipated this need to go fully digital. Most, or at least many, government information systems were simply unprepared for employees migrating to the digital format. And, of course, it added to the strain on the employees themselves, and it also put greater strain on supporting services that had to do everything within a very short time span to set up a new format of work to help the employees migrate to the digital reality. And another thing that I already mentioned is a set of standard procedures, or rather lack thereof. So it's important to have a set of rules and also prepare the institutions for such things. That is a very interesting thing. Can I add something? I just record that even before the pandemic, we had an assessment of 48 local teams, and they thought that they were underdepreciated, they felt there was a lack of feedback, and they didn't understand what were their career prospects. What did we do? This summer we revisited those teams, we decided to provide them with a questionnaire once again, and we found that these anxieties had exacerbated. Employees were feeling even more underappreciated. They didn't have any idea of what their career prospects were, and of course there was lack of feedback as they felt. So these factors only exacerbated during the pandemic, as we can see. That is very interesting to note. But now, before we move on to solutions, I would like to point out that you have all pointed out the digital factor, because it's indispensable when organizing remote work. Let's have a look at the poll. Most people think that ICT infrastructure is not an important factor. They are not choosing it in this poll. The most important thing, according to them, is the growing burden on employees during the pandemic. What do you think? As far as burnout and stress levels are concerned, I often hear complaints that employees are very fatigued psychologically due to online conferences, and they think that their efficiency is far lower as compared to when they work in person. And if there is a video conference attended by more than 7 people, some employees think that this is just to tick the box and that it's really not that important, just a formality. Yes, there are research papers on that, and these research papers reveal that if there are many screens with people on the screen and if the background is blurred, all of that adds to the anxiety. So what do we see? We see that we had been developing digital before the pandemic. We thought that it was the panacea, it was the magic wand that would help us address any task, but it turns out that that's not the case. Well, there is a flip side to everything. We're going to pick that up, but for our speakers, I would like to put the latest data on the screen. Have a look at these trends of changes in managing personnel. What changed, as you can see, digitalization ranks first, and all the rest is lagging behind, far behind. And as you can see, that managerial culture and the social life of companies rank last. Interestingly, I would like to ask to launch the last poll for those who follow us online. We asked what changes in managing personnel were the most useful during the crisis. We're going to look at the answers a little later. On the one hand, some people think that digitalization is not that big of a deal. Others think that it's all about digitalization. So what do you think? What are the changes you have witnessed in motivating employees, in managing your personnel? Yes, I fully disagree with those who think that digitalization was a bad thing. On the contrary, I think it has been a huge boon. Right now, online, you can connect to any expert that can help you in making a decision right now, right here. At our university, we introduced online conferences very fast, very swiftly. Besides, it helps disseminate information among a wide audience. We know that small and medium enterprises had been suffering due to lack of information. But after the pandemic, we managed to connect them to online conferences and address the sore points. Before, it had been impossible. It had taken months and months. Right now, it's far faster. Now, paper documentation is another boon which helped us manage people remotely and organize our working processes. And we migrated to the digital, and it's all digital right now, applications and all that. People have learned to work remotely, swiftly address any issues that arise. I think if it had happened the year before, the previous one, we wouldn't have been so fast at learning these new processes. But it's true that most government systems are not yet prepared for working online. You had two thoughts too? You mentioned something about the competences and self-organization. You mentioned that it is very important. What about these competences? Is it going to be developed now in Nizhny Novgorod, and are you going to introduce some changes to managing HR? Yes, that's true. Some think that HR is just a side project and that it doesn't deserve attention, whereas in reality it's not true, and we've set up a single HR service, and it's right now a mainstream, and we are working with our partners, with RANEPA in particular, addressing all things we need to address, and managers say that their employees have to learn self-organization and competencies that they are lacking to address the questions we are facing. And I think the pandemic has pushed people towards more efficient learning. In the past, people simply saw that as a formality. Right now, they have the need, the motivation to learn, to raise their motivations. This will create competitive environment probably in the market, and people understand that they've got to develop their competences right now.
Thank you. Just we have 2 videos to watch, but unfortunately we'll not be able to make it because we're short of time. We'll show them in the on social media. We have only 5 minutes left, and I'd like to learn from the speakers what else changed. The public authorities that had lagged behind in terms of digitalization, have they changed? What do you make of that? Well, I would support Andrew in saying that the key change is the format of interaction between the government and the authorities and the business sector and local communities, which is the most substantial change that we are witnessing. In terms of efficiency of remote teleconference meetings, we have made a huge leap forward in the public administration. All right, video teleconferences, and what else? Digital document flow is number 2. New software. So these 2 are the big drivers of change in the public administration system. Look at the poll results. With narrow margin, the option was necessary to amend the regulations has the lead. Have there been made changes and amendments to the provisions of regulations? And you said, Maxim, that safety was the top priority. Have you been able to put safety first? Well, we are lucky ones, and we are an transnational company. We saw the Chinese experience. They were submerged in the pandemic before everybody else, and we were quite quick on the uptake to introduce all these measures, not waiting till it was imposed top-down from the public administration authorities. We have been able to put safety first. Right, we have 3 minutes left. Victor, can you comment this additional poll or anything else, and probably the final remarks would be pronounced by you? Well, a lot has been said about the technology and about the role of the leaders and the teams. What matters most is that now we feel the urgent need for that, and the new technology is inevitable. Its advent is inevitable. And now we are seeing more interest and more need for the new rules and regulations and technologies. And I think that the bottom line is that we can run the marathon only if we are united by a single set of goals and have a shared perspective and moderate the HR community professionally. Having all those tenets that we share that will help us run the changes and manage the changes. Thank you. We are finalizing the discussion. I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, and I wish you every success in your fight against the COVID crisis. Thank you for your perspectives and visions. I was pleased to hear that conclusions have been made and lessons have been learned. And anyway, we have been able to derive some benefit and increase our efficiency. Thank you, everybody attending and streaming us. Thank you. Goodbye.